recreate that, but you get 4, 5, 6 years of runway before somebody else can come in and then compete with you, on an equal term. So those are the kind of things we look at. Yeah.
Um, okay, so you mainly look at whether the business is able to, because the business has a sufficient time to adapt, and whether this the amount of time it takes for competitors to come in the business and actually compete with them has a higher barrier to entry, so that for a long period of time it can uh, the current business can keep doing well. So regarding that, when you decide to say sell a business, or a business that has had these entry barriers or has these entry barriers, how do you decide when to sell? Because some people tend to sell when something drastically goes wrong within the business, and most people or some other people would sell when it reaches the intrinsic value, or they have an horizon that, okay, I'm aiming for 3 to 4 years ish, and then I will be selling this business. So how do you go about deciding when is the right time for you to sell, or when is the right time for you to exit and look for better opportunities?
Right. So selling is itself, I think selling is one area where I think matlab, we read a lot of material on, what to buy, when to buy, what parameters we should kind of apply. Selling is one area where I feel, the less has been said, but it's more complicated than buying. A lot of behavioral aspects also come into play in selling. But from my perspective, what we do is that, there are three different uh, reasons why we sell. The first and foremost reason is when you realize that you made a mistake. And I think that's the most difficult part, in investing, career of anybody. I think everybody makes mistakes. Out of 10 decisions, you get six right, four wrong. So it's important to acknowledge when you make a mistake that you made a mistake and then, exit. So that's the first reason for selling. Second reason for selling is, when your thesis is no longer valid. So you have a thesis around, why you hold certain position, certain business, right? That thesis can change, both because of the internal factors and external factors. The industry dynamics can change, and that may also mean that your thesis is no longer valid, or some of the things within the company would change, where either you were betting on a person to kind of take company to the next level, that person is no longer there. The capital allocation that company has demonstrated in the past or promised, that changes. They do, and they kind of, uh, do some big acquisition which you think is irrelevant. They do some diversification. Those capital allocation things, you know, would then again mean that your thesis on the capital allocation may no longer be valid. Again, another example is that some corporate governance issue crops up. Again, all your things are, all bets are off then. So, so whenever your thesis changes, you need to sell. Uh, third is The third reason why we said is that when we get a better risk reward. So, so rather than saying that I would want to uh, kind of riding the position till intrinsic value or beyond intrinsic value, we are always on lookout for good ideas, good risk reward. And if on the same business quality, if you get a better risk reward, it makes sense to reallocate capital. So at that point in time, you either kind of trim your position depending upon your capital availability. If you don't have available capital, you trim your position from existing ones and then kind of reallocate capital to a better risk reward. So those are the kind of things that we look at. As I said, intrinsic value is very, very difficult to measure. Also, there are a lot of moving part in the business. So intrinsic value today will be very different from 2 years down the line because the business dynamics will be very different. So, so hence, and we are very valuation conscious people. We our at the core of whatever that we do, we believe that there is certain valuation, you know, ceiling beyond which, if you buy, then your expected rate of return would be significantly lower. So whenever the threshold is broken, I think it makes sense to sell. So these are the three or four scenarios in which we make those selling decisions.
Yeah. So you discussed about how you make a thesis and you sell when something, uh, something that you initially thought in your thesis would be a reason for you to buy is no longer true. But the problem with selling is, as you also mentioned, that it is less discussed than buying. And the thing about selling is, you can get biased psychologically. So what do you do when it goes up 20%, a few days later, or what do you do when it's a failing business, but you've put so much time, so much energy, and you've got this thesis that makes a lot of sense. So how do you go about constructing your thesis without actually being biased psychologically, and then knowing that, okay, maybe I'm, being diverted by my mind, and that I should now be ready to, or be open to selling a failing sort of company.
Yeah, it's easier said than done. I think, yeah, I've known very few guys who are not biased. Almost everyone is biased one way or the other. And there is something called ownership bias, right? Once you own something, you continue to look for positive reinforcements and data points.
Yeah.
So that's bound to happen. But over time, you have to train yourself to kind of look at data points objectively. And I think it's something which comes only with practice. And nobody is perfect in that sense, but everybody tries to improve. So you try to look at data points objectively, and most of the times what I've seen is that the data points generally yells at you that your thesis is broken. Just that because you have put in so much of effort or time or money, you tend to believe that the data points are not correct, are not representing the full picture. But in a sense, you are fooling yourself, and whatever effort, money, everything that you put in, that's a sunk cost. Doesn't matter. So everything is mark to market. So matlab, what you need to think is from here on whether my position will give me the expected return or my desired return or not. If that's not likely to be the case, the probability of that is low. Then I think you have to respect the fact data point and then kind of make your decision. And one thing that I strongly believe in, that our business is a business of regret. We if we look at something and that goes up and we don't buy, it's a regret. If we buy something and it goes down, it's a regret. If we sell something and then it goes up, it's a regret. If we don't sell something and it goes down, then also it's a regret. So our business is a business of regret, right? So we have to be kind of be okay with all those things happening. You sell something, goes up 2, 3 times. That's okay. You have to kind of follow your process. I think that's more important. You have to be disciplined, follow a process, not get carried away. Over a period of time, I think that will give you a very decent result.
Yeah. Um, I I really like the example of the business of regret, because it is a business where people tend to feel bad for themselves for any result that happens. And regarding this, people create, say, portfolios with a very large amount of businesses, so that they have a possibility where, if one clicks, it becomes the next, multi-bagger or something, then the entire returns would do better. And whereas, some people like taking very concentrated bets, bets where, they know that they have very few chances of losing, and for that reason they take a no-brainer bet in that sense. So how do you go about creating your portfolio? How many, say, stocks do you tend to hold, and how spread are you across different businesses or different industries? Yeah.
So this entire debate between concentration and diversification, I think that's an ongoing thing. There is no right or wrong answer to that. Essentially, it boils down to your temperament, what you can hold, what gives you, what allows you to, sleep well at night. I think that's the kind of strategy that one should adopt. Typically, my portfolio has around 15 to 20 positions, with top five being 50-60% of the position. I don't go, at the cost, at the starting point, I don't go below, above 8 to 10%, in terms of position sizing. And then, I earlier used to kind of cut my position beyond a certain threshold, but now I've learned to let them run, beyond the point. And then, if it gets too uncomfortable psychologically to hold on to a position, then you of course trim your position. But again, as I said, there are no right or wrong answers. Both diversification and concentration have its own pros and cons. The only thing that I would want to add is that you have to create or structure a portfolio, uh, whereby you remain in the game. See, the most important part in the investing is to remain in the game for long, because then only you will be able to reap the benefit of compounding. So don't do anything which kind of takes you off the game. You know, if you create a portfolio which kind of puts you back by 5-10 years, just because one thing goes wrong or one of the position your thesis goes wrong, something bad happens, then that's not a great place to be in. So, Professor Bakshi, he used to, always tell us that shit happens, right? I mean, whatever great things that you want to build in the thesis, everything going hunky dory, but then shit happens. So I think one has to always keep that in mind, that shit happens. So I think, keeping that in mind, you have to take a balanced approach whereby you don't diversify too much, whereby if your winners are, very large winners, also doesn't make impact on the portfolio. That's also counterproductive. At the same time, don't concentrate to a level whereby, if something goes wrong, then, you are in a bad place. So I think you have to maintain a balance. I think, portfolio of anywhere from 10 to 20 stocks gives you that balance.
Yeah, it makes sense to be able to, stay somewhere in the middle. I think historically being in the middle has also done much better than choosing or picking a side, but it again boils down to temperament. So this question was actually linked to what you said earlier. So you talked about how you engage with, say, company management, or in your thesis you look at capital allocation decisions, etc. So when you're engaging with company management, or when you're talking to, say, people who know the business very well, do you try to focus more on capital allocation decisions and past, say, return on invested capital or return on equity, or do you look at corporate strategy and how the business is planning to fuel growth or move themselves forward, and how management is being honest on that?
Right. So I think, see, essentially, I operate in small and micro cap space, right? So for us, taking any investment decision without meeting management is almost impossible, because, you need to really understand, where the management is planning to take the company through. And unless you understand their mindset, how they are thinking, how they're approaching business, what are their plans for 3 to 5 years, uh, you know, historical context is useful, uh, but so it's a necessary condition to have good ROCs, ROICs, everything, but it's not a sufficient condition. You need to understand, whether this company can be taken to the next level by the current management, whether uh, they they have also a long-term alignment in terms of how they're approaching a business, because in business you have to take some decisions which may be impacting you adversely in the short term. but are very beneficial in the long term. So when you interact with management, you need to understand how they think, about some of the situations, and that gives you some insight into, what steps the management will take in certain situations. Also, what I realized is that it's not a single interaction that kind of gives you the conviction. It's a series of interactions over years that builds conviction. So what happens is that you kind of form a view on a management to do something. Then over a period, as they take action in different scenarios, different situation, how they behave, will either kind of nullify your hypothesis or kind of positively influence your hypothesis, and that will either kind of reduce your conviction or increase your conviction. So it's only built over a period of time. You have to be interacting with them over a period of time in different situations, see directions, or not only judge by what they say, but actually judge more by what they do. And I think that's more reflective of their thinking, where they put money, how they interact with you in bad times. Those are the kind of things that matter more. When there's a good time, do they reward you, by paying more dividend? Are they reinvesting money in the business, or are they kind of taking money home and diversifying into some other business stream? Those are the things you only come to know as the time passes. So it's always a process. It's always your journey that you have to travel, and that's what gives you conviction. Okay.
Yeah. uh, I think with management, it can be deceptive to a level. So you really need to look back and check whether they have been doing what they're saying and whether they're going in the right direction. Because a lot of businesses, for example, diversifying, Vitaly calls it diversification. So it can drastically affect the business, and it is important to keep investing in the business. So you also mentioned that you have a preference for certain specific industries because of headwinds, and you have to look at business relative to its industry. And for that, do you have, so basically, what industries do you prefer looking at, or what sectors do you prefer looking at when seeking value opportunities in, say, India? Because certain industries can have a much bigger sort of a earning power and a much bigger headwind to them, and have better management than other industries. And yeah, if so, why do you prefer these industries?
So in general, so I'm a bottom-up investor. I am very sector agnostic. I look for good businesses, good management, and good valuation. Uh, but while evaluating any business, what we do look at is that whether the industry structure is right or not. What do I mean by industry structure is that how many players, how fragmented that industry is. Is that a consolidated industry? Is there a very fragmented industry? Does everyone in the industry make good money or not? Is the industry growing at decent rate? So those are the basic things that you look at, because I I've come to realize that it's very difficult that when almost everybody in the industry is making subpar returns, the probability of any business in that industry making superior return is very, very low. On the other hand, if almost everybody in the industry is making 20% ROC, most likely, if you have a competent management and a good business, then you will also make very decent ROC. So it's very important to look at the industry structure and see how the peers are doing. Uh, and is there any white space available for the smaller players to go and take market share? So that also means that, let's say, if the industry is very consolidated, 70-80% of the market share is held by four guys, which are large enough, then a small player will find it very, very difficult to grow itself, because those are anyway large players present in the business. They have their own, they have a scale advantage, and there is not much room for the smaller player to take away market share from the unorganized guys. So relatively fragmented industry, uh, and somebody, if you have a value proposition, you can grow. But a very, very consolidated industry, unless you are one of those players, it becomes very, very difficult to grow the business.
Okay. And so regarding industry, so you mentioned on how the industry must be fragmented and growing, and an industry that where everyone has superior sort of returns compared to the market. So you were a chemical engineer initially, so you must I'm assuming have some knowledge about that industry in particular. So what are some metrics you look at that industry? How do you go about analyzing that industry? And are there any, say, industry specific magazines, reports, or books that can help others improve their circle of competence in this industry? And what are some things to basically take note of on to really know how this industry is being run?
So I am a chemical engineer by education, but I have not practiced chemical engineering much. So in that sense, that industrial background I do not have. I was in consulting, oil and gas consulting for a few years, but it was more techno-commercial in nature. Uh, so, so again, I don't have any preference or a understanding of a industry per se, but over time, what that I write of circle of competence is a very dynamic thing. It's very easy to say that this is not my circle of competence and hence I will give it a pass, right? But some of the good investors that I've seen, they actually increase their circle of competence by learning about new industries, new trends, what is happening, how the technology is changing, how the macro things are changing. So it's always a learning process. Circle of competence is something I believe that we should not kind of define too strictly that, okay, this is my circle of competence, I can't go beyond that. It's always an evolving thing. You have to give effort to increase your circle of competence. Uh, on the industry side, as I said, I am very industry agnostic, but in each of the industry that I have studied and learned something about, I think the trade journals in that industry are very, very useful means. Second thing is always helps is talking to the industry players, people who are operating in the industry, distributors, customers, dealers. That gives you a lot of insight about the industry. So it's not always a desk job. You can't learn about the industry nitty-gritties just by sitting in your office. You have to interact with a lot of stakeholders in that industry to really understand the dynamics of that industry. So I think it makes sense to combine the desk work with the scuttlebutt. So scuttlebutt is actually a very important part of your investment process. That gives you a lot of insights which you would otherwise have missed. So I think, trade journals and scuttlebutt are the two things on the industry side that should be part of the investment process that will add a lot of value.
Okay. Uh, yeah. So so it, as you mentioned, looking at trade journals or scuttlebutt investing will be something that I'll be looking at more, and I hope listeners will also be looking at more reports or certain ways to improve the circle of competence, because you cannot limit yourself to a certain position. Let's say if an industry vanishes and you're good in that industry, you have to find a way to slowly increase your circle of competence. You don't have to rush it, but at least improve and sort of get better in certain places that you weren't in. Um, and so, my last question. So I ask everyone this question. whoever comes to my podcast. So, what advice do you have for younger investors or those starting out, and what are some key sort of principles everyone should take note of? If, for example, you could go back in time and tell yourself things that could, prevent you from making a lot of mistakes, what would they be?
So, so two, three things from my own learning mistake perspective. First is, you need to have a process. You need to have a process, a process. That process will evolve, will change, will improve. But you can't start without a process. So you can't make investment decision uh, without a process. Uh, in some time, what happens is that in good market, you make some decisions without a process that will still make money, and you will get lured into thinking that this works. But believe me, if you don't have a process, at some point in time, when the market turns, again, you will be penalized. So you need to have a process, and then keep on working on your process, and don't abandon the process. As I said, it's very easy to say, okay, I sold something because of a process, but it went 3, 4x. I should, you know, I should have done things differently. But following process will save you from a lot of drawdowns, a lot of making a lot of mistakes. So have a process. Second is, uh, don't be too judgmental. Don't judge people, businesses, uh, and then box them into certain category. Businesses evolve, people evolve, things change. If you are very judgmental or opinionated about something, okay, this management, is not good. They've done things in the past, so now I will never look at this business. This business never made money, so I will not look at the business. But what happens is at certain point in time, people change, businesses change, business dynamics change. So always approach anything with an open mind. So that's a second thing. And third thing is that when you do a lot of work, allocate well. If you have done a lot of work and if you think you are right, and if you think there is good risk reward where you can make big money, and this is once in a decade kind of an opportunity, once in a 5-year opportunity, then make most of it. Don't hesitate to allocate. If you hesitate to allocate, you have missed an opportunity. You only get handful of opportunities where you make 10, 15, 20, 50 bagger, 100 bagger, right? So do utilize them by allocating money. If you are not backing yourself up, nobody else will. So I think allocate well. And these are the two, three things that, I learned from my own, experiences, mistakes, that, if you do this, it will serve you well. And the fourth, which everybody says, keep on expanding your horizons, read a lot, have multidisciplinary reading. Don't restrict yourself to only reading about investing, learn about diverse things. That will always give you a context of how the world works. I think that's also very important.
Yeah, yeah, I think a lot of this is it's harder to put into practice, but I think after it's been say put into practice, it can do lots of sense wonders, because you would be able to control your decisions and really know what's going on. And like Manga says, it's like a lattice work of just things that come in your mind, and you would be better able to make investing decisions. So with that, I think we can end this podcast, and I'm very thankful that you're here. So thank you once again for joining.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.